The St. Lawrence-FDR Power Project, celebrating its 60th anniversary in 2018, is a shining example of New York State's enduring commitment to clean energy and to Governor Andrew Cuomo's leadership in developing and implementing new and innovative energy technologies and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, combat climate change, and drive economic growth across the Empire State. For millions of years, long before it had a name, the waters of the St. Lawrence River flowed eastward to the sea. Its raw power, its enormous potential as a hydroelectric energy source, untapped. For decades, the people of the United States and Canada dreamed of capturing it, and they finally did. It was never a question of whether to harness the power of the St. Lawrence. It was a question of when. Hydroelectricity, after all, was clean, reliable, safe, and inexpensive, with the potential to foster economic growth and well-being on both sides of the border. The United States and Canada envisioned a huge power dam linking the two countries, its output shared equally, and with it a seaway linking the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes. Moving forward, however, was another question, as a debate raged over who would develop the American half of this international undertaking. For decades, public and private power interests clashed, each seeking traction in the New York State Legislature. Governor Charles Evans Hughes, Governor Al Smith, former President Theodore Roosevelt, and others argued passionately for public development. But private power advocates wielded great influence in Albany, and repeated public power initiatives were voted down. The debate continued with no end in sight until a man who believed deeply in the public power cause became governor. Franklin Delano Roosevelt galvanized public support, and the tide finally turned. In 1930, during Roosevelt's first term, the legislature set up the St. Lawrence Power Development Commission. Among its advisors, a young lawyer who would later serve as governor and a Power Authority trustee.
We did the research in the law to establish the fact that the water power rights on the international rivers, St. Lawrence and the Niagara, belong to the sovereign, i.e. to the people of the state of New York. Another job was to draft a bill to establish the New York State Power Authority.
Legislation establishing the Power Authority of the state of New York was signed into law by Governor Roosevelt on April 27, 1931.
One of the most important national decisions taken last year was that of the state of New York, when we decided to go ahead with the development of the 1.25 million horsepower of the St. Lawrence River. We are proceeding with that, and I hope we'll get the help and assistance of the federal government and the Canadian authorities. This power is to be developed by the state itself through a power authority.
But for another 2 decades, the Power Authority was little more than a paper agency, as it sought federal and international authorization to move forward, but encountered more legislative and political delay. It seemed to take forever, but the green light finally came in the summer of 1953.
The Power Authority has been licensed by the Federal Power Commission and designated by President Eisenhower to develop the great power project on the St. Lawrence River. The entire cost will be paid from self-financing revenue bonds without 1 cent of cost to federal or state taxpayers.
Raising those funds, however, would not be easy.
How are you going to get people to invest their money in an organization that has never done anything? At least that was the way Governor Dewey saw it. So he brought in Mr. Moses to run the Power Authority because he had experience in building. And he thought the financial community would trust him and would lend the money, and they did. And the $335 million that was sold in a single issue to build St. Lawrence was the largest public power issue in history at that time.
Robert Moses was one of the greatest men the greatest man that I've ever worked for. He was accomplished in every discipline, you might say. He knew how to obtain financing. He knew how to select proper people to be members of the authority and put together a great organization. The project initially was scheduled to be accomplished in 7 years. He said we're going to do it in 5 years, and we're going to do it for the amount of money that was borrowed to build the project and complete the project, and that was done right as he had directed.
Construction began in August 1954. The Power Authority and Ontario Hydro joining forces on the strength of a handshake between its chairman, Robert Moses, and Robert Saunders, and a verbal agreement to split all costs 50-50.
Our general manager at the time and chief engineer was William S. Chapin. We call him with great affection Colonel Chapin.
It became obvious at the outset that the two power entities would get along famously in spite of the fact that we worked under different laws and customs. There was never an argument in the 4 years of construction of the St. Lawrence that couldn't be easily straightened out.
Building St. Lawrence was a complex, monumental task requiring tremendous planning, coordination, and execution. It meant taming a river, building huge dams and dikes that transformed the river's international rapids into a lake as large as the District of Columbia, water ultimately destined to fall through 32 turbine generators at the project's main power dam. Thousands of workers labored round the clock through summer heat and bitter winter cold, pouring enough concrete to pave a 2-lane highway from Messina to Washington, D.C., and moving enough earth to fill railroad cars stretching 8 times coast to coast.
This place was just alive with people and workers, and it was just amazing to be here at that time. These guys worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was just absolutely amazing.
Workers came from all over the United States. Many seasoned veterans of large hydroelectric projects elsewhere. But there was local, homegrown talent as well.
For a person like myself, being a native of the area and young at the time, it was quite an experience. It really was.
It was an opportunity for anybody to come in and do interesting work and to make a little better pay than they would be elsewhere, and it was quite a time. It was very exciting.
It wasn't hard to get up in the morning and go to work, and you hear that today that, whoa, I don't know if I can get out of bed to go to work. Well, back then, you jumped out of bed to go to work.
Everything about this project was big, real big. Millions upon millions of tons of rock, stone, dirt, concrete, cement, and steel. Spread out over nearly 40 miles. Multiple work sites. on tens of thousands of acres. With heavy construction equipment everywhere, massive steam shovels, huge cranes, and supersized trucks.
We had 100 drivers on that job there at Waddington, a day shift and a night shift. We get those old utes all rolling, they made a lot of dust. It was hard digging there and everything, but they did a great job, great job.
Our concrete on this project has held up very well, considering that a lot of it was poured in sub-zero temperature.
I worked up the Iroquois Dam, and it was 52 below one morning. My gosh, boy, it was cold.
That was cold. That was cold. That was cold. That's the time to get inside with a cup of coffee.
But the coffee breaks were few and far between. The work continued nonstop, amid an ever-present sense of urgency.
Yeah, we were kind of under the gun all the time to get the job done and get things taken care of so that they could start selling power.
And we worked as a team. We didn't work by the clock. We worked until we got the job done.
We received 100% cooperation from the gang up there.
Very quickly, almost overnight it seemed, the project took shape, and the dams and dikes were soon in place. All that remained was to flood newly created Lake St. Lawrence, the last step before first power.
Let's watch now the actual demolition of the upstream earth cofferdam that created the power plant.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
I'd say it took 4 days for the water to finally come to its normal level. And then they started Unit 32. We were wondering, is everything going to work here? Are we going to drown, or they're going to? All the head gates were down, of course, all the way across the dam, and then they're going to flood the unit that we just worked on, and everything worked perfect.
St. Lawrence began operation in July 1958. One by one, generating units on the U.S. and Canadian sides of the power dam were successfully tested and placed into operation. The project reached full power in 1959, shortly after it was formally dedicated by Queen Elizabeth II and Vice President Richard Nixon. A monument at the center of the power dam is inscribed with these words. This stone bears witness to the common purpose of two nations, whose frontiers are the frontiers of friendship, whose ways are the ways of freedom, and whose works are the works of peace. From those first days, the St. Lawrence-FDR Power Project has generated hundreds of billions of kilowatt hours of clean, reliable, low-cost hydroelectricity. Year after year, it quietly works its magic. In 2003, following an innovative process that involved extensive public participation, the Power Authority received a new 50-year operating license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
We focused during that process on the needs of the communities in the North Country, things that the Power Authority could do during its next 50 years that would be helpful to those communities. We focused on the environment and things that could be done to improve the environment, and we also focused on the economy and looked to what we could try and give back to the North Country. We have been able to make commitments to the various communities in the North Country that will be beneficial to them, and also looking to the viability of the Power Authority long-term so that we know we can continue our mission and be economically sound.
The Power Authority is here and is going to continue to be here to lend its support to those ongoing projects. What the communities want to do, the Power Authority's been a good neighbor and a good citizen and is more than willing to participate in helping the area move forward.
In 2013, the Power Authority completed a massive $281 million upgrade of the project's core generation infrastructure.
Our team did a fabulous job in doing the life extension and modernization. We have increased capacity and operating ranges of each of the 16 units. We have state-of-the-art controls and electrical systems. It's ready for the next 50 years.
The modernization initiative and the millions and millions of dollars that are being reinvested to upgrade, improve, enhance, and further strengthen and ensure it's key not only to the St. Lawrence but system-wide.
The production of power is inextricably connected to economic development and to the creation of jobs.
It's the anchor for the Alcoa plant, which provides good jobs in the North Country, and all the businesses that do business with Alcoa. It also provides economic development power to other businesses in the North Country.
Well, I always look at the Power Authority as an economic engine, an enabler, a facilitator, and the North Country and the St. Lawrence Project is a flagship for us as an authority. We're a key economic engine for the state of New York.
And the Power Authority's been very helpful to the communities across the county and the North Country in doing studies about things that can be done to create jobs here in the area, and sustainable jobs. And the future, I think, is bright.
The 60th year is an exciting time for St. Lawrence and the authority, being the first generating facility, the stewardship, the vision that FDR had in this facility, the workmanship of Robert Mose and his team of builders in the 50s, and then this continued stewardship by our employees, both the retirees and our present members of IVW 2032, our management team and our support team in White Plains. It's a great time.
It's our first plant. It's a beautiful plant. And you have great people running that plant. To all the workers of the St. Lawrence-FDR project, past and present, a big thank you on behalf of the Board of Trustees, on behalf of everyone at the New York Power Authority for their great work, their great stewardship of that magnificent asset in a beautiful setting in northern New York.
Hydropower is at the foundation of the Power Authority, and the St. Lawrence, a key piece of that rock. And 60 years later, to be going even stronger is a very exciting and notable celebration.
(2018), 60 years since first power. Those who helped build St. Lawrence and worked here for decades afterwards have happy memories.
Today, looking back, it was a fantastic opportunity, and the Power Authority has been great the whole time. Will I say I had a bad day? I can't remember, They were all good days.
Well, it was interesting. All this work was interesting. You could always learn something, always.
I don't know, I miss it right today.
I would have to say that pretty near everyone that was working on the project pretty much enjoyed what they were doing. If you did your job and you were happy, that's all. I fortunately worked with some very good people, and the people that I worked with, you couldn't ask for better people.
Everybody believed in and was so proud to be a part of this workforce.
It was exciting and interesting, and a real good experience. I'm not sorry at all that I got involved here, and I would do it again.
From those earliest days Through the decades and several generations, the men and women of St. Lawrence have continued a historic mission, generating clean, reliable, low-cost electricity and serving the people of New York State. It is a proud tradition that will continue for as long as the waters of the St. Lawrence flow.